Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and welcome to Talking Point. My name is Faraz Patel on this Tuesday, the 18th of June. Of course, tomorrow is the inauguration of President Cyril Ramaphosa, which we will bring it to you live here on Hilaal TV. Now, talking about new terms, 7 administrations, and the ANC's coalition with the DA, IFP, and the Patriotic Alliance now boasts 273 seats in the National Assembly. Now, this comes as the Good Party, under the leadership of Patricia de Lille, has now signed an intent to be part of the government of national unity. Now, yesterday, ANC spokesperson Mahlengi Bengu Mutsiri said discussions with other parties were ongoing in the spirit of inclusivity. She said the GNU will ensure representation in government and legislatures by all participating parties. Joining us now, I'd like to welcome Good Party Secretary General Brett Herron. Brett, good day. Thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal TV.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi.
Okay, so Brett, talk to us about Good Party's decision to want to join or be part of this dialogue for the government of national unity.
Well, I mean, the decision follows some negotiation and some engagement with the ANC last Sunday, the 9th of June, when the leader of Good, Patricia de Lille, and I met with the ANC's negotiating team. And they presented the context within which they were looking to put together a government of national unity. They presented some foundational principles that they wanted parties to agree to, and they introduced what they called a minimum program of government, which is now being called the minimum program of priorities. We made some input, particularly around the program of government. We wanted social security and a social safety net included in there, and we wanted the spatial legacy of apartheid or the spatial injustices of our history to be addressed as part of the program. And there were some other discussions around the language of the way this agreement could be presented to South Africa. Then on Friday, we received a draft statement of intent, and we saw that the ANC and the other parties had accepted our input. And so, in the spirit of developing a South Africa that is united, as opposed to the polarizing results that we saw in the elections, Good has found no reason not to be part of the government of national unity, or no reason not to be part of the national dialogue and the Lakota or the strategic session that will follow the signing of that statement of intent.
Brett, there's two parties that are, of course, were part of the then multi-party charter. One would think that that multi-party charter is probably closer to its collapse. That's the DA and the IFP. Now, I know that the Good Party has been at loggerheads with the DA and the IFP, well, mostly with the DA with regards to a number of its policies. So, I mean, within that national dialogue, how do you seem to maybe want to find a halfway point with a party like the DA in trying to be on the same path within this government of national unity?
Well, we must remember that what we've done is sign a declaration of intent or statement of intent, and that statement of intent includes foundational principles around non-racialism, non-sexism, a unified South Africa, commitment to the Constitution and the rule of law, and then in the minimum program of governing priorities, the document talks about transformation. It talks about economic justice. It talks about addressing spatial inequalities. It talks about the preservation of workers' rights. And so it is easy for us to sign that statement of intent and to champion those commitments because they align very closely with our policies and with what we went to the voters with in our manifesto. So this is not going to, for us, about clashes between parties that have clashed before, because as we understand it, the parties that have signed the statement of intent around the formation of a government of national unity have agreed to these foundational principles and have agreed to this minimum program of government. So it's ready for the DA maybe to answer questions about how it overcomes some of its own ideologies and some of its own campaigning, because that document is very comfortable for us, but it certainly would require the DA to make some ideological shifts for them to have agreed to it. So I don't see this, and we don't see this as a battle between the DA and Good, because if both parties have committed to the same document and live out that commitment, then there should be no clash at all.
Brett, of course, the opposition benches, they have their doubts with regards to whether the government of national unity can actually work. How is this going to function from a Good perspective? What is there that Good's going to bring to the table to potentially make this GNU work?
Well, I mean, as I said, the statement of intent, which contains the foundational principles and the program of government, could have been our party's manifesto in the election. If you look at our party's manifesto and our campaigning, and you look at the statement of intent, you will find that they're indiscernible. And so we will bring all of that expertise that informed our policy and our manifesto. We'll bring all of that passion, all of that political will to see these things being implemented, because they are so fundamentally aligned to what we have been campaigning about and what we are about. So we bring the research that went into that our own manifesto, which aligns closely with the statement of intent, and we bring the political will. We may not bring hundreds of seats, but we certainly bring expertise, commitment, and will to seeing that minimum program of priorities being implemented.
Brett, when we had you the last time on in April, we spoke about coalition governments within the metros, and there was obviously massive debates with regards to that, massive contestation with that. How important is this national dialogue going to be with regards to this coalition within a National Assembly perspective? Because the last thing South African citizens want is a musical chairs with regards to heads of state.
Yeah, I think that the way that this has been approached is very different to our experience in the local government process, where the negotiations were largely around positions and fighting over positions. When we met with the ANC, we didn't discuss any positions, and we haven't asked for any position. We haven't said that if we don't get a ministry, we are leading the government of national unity. We've made no demands, nor did we discuss positions at all with the ANC. And so we're very encouraged that the focus was on a governing program, what this government of national unity will aim to achieve, as well as the foundational principles that we all agree to. And that process is much more sustainable than a process that is purely around a fight about positions. So obviously the haggling around positions will happen, but the foundational document and the foundational agreement has got nothing to do with positions and has got everything to do with what this government of national unity will aim to achieve and what values we all ascribe to. And so I think we are starting to learn from the experience of local government, and putting it into practice in the National Assembly will be a test for the maturity of politicians and for their commitment to the document they signed, rather than the chase for positions in government.
After the break, I continue my conversation with Brett Herron. We're going to be touching, of course, on Good Party and what are they going to be bringing to this national dialogue, and of course, should an agreement be made, their commitment towards the government of national unity. Do stay tuned to Talking Point. Welcome back to Talking About. I'm in conversation with Good Party Secretary General Brett Herron. Brett, you've mentioned that the party does not want to really have any contestation with regards to ministerial positions or any other cabinet positions. So one would guess that it's more on a case of oversight and trying to hold the rest of the members of this government of national unity to account. Of course, the African National Congress, they have members who are still sitting in the Zondo Commission of Inquiry. Their names are in that report. Nothing's been done yet. But then, of course, in the last few days, the Democratic Alliance had a leader, had an MP, excuse me, by the name of Ronaldo Gauss, whose name popped up for having alleged racist remarks that he did on social media. So when you take those two potential examples right over there, how much of that task is Good Party going to have in trying to make sure that the accountability mechanism is put in place?
Well, I mean, the mechanisms of the government of national unity, the political committee that was spoken about to resolve disputes and to make sure that parties are conducting themselves and remain committed to what is contained in the statement of intent and what may come out of the national dialogue or a Lekgotla, because the statement of intent proposes both a Lekgotla, which is a strategic planning session for the parties in the GNU, and then that will be followed by a national dialogue, which will be much broader than the parties in the GNU. It will include civil society and business as well. And so the structures that are going to be put in place will be there to hold parties to account, to implement what is in that statement of intent. Now, that statement of intent has clear policies or clear commitments around racism, and the Ronaldo Gauss incident is for the DA to manage in line with its commitments that it has made in signing that statement of intent. And similarly, it is for the ANC to demonstrate their commitment to the statement of intent when it comes to holding some of their own members to account for their implication in the state of capture report. But the state of capture report is obviously slightly different because the prosecution of those members is in the hands of an independent Chapter 9 institution, the National Prosecuting Authority.
Brett, National Treasury, this is where the big debate's going to come in terms of who and how this should be managed. What is Good Party's take on making sure that whoever takes up National Treasury is able to do one thing and one thing only: create growth for this country, curb unemployment, and get South Africa back on an economically stable environment?
No, Farouz, I don't think it's so important as to who's the Minister of Finance and who gets to be in charge of National Treasury, because ultimately the Minister of Finance cannot pass a budget without Parliament approving it. And before it gets to Parliament, it goes through Cabinet. And Cabinet will now be made up of multiple parties, and Parliament will, the ANC doesn't have an outright majority. So whoever is appointed the Minister of Finance, his or her role will be to be engaging with their partners in the government of national unity to ensure that the budget implements the statement of intent and the minimum or the minimum governing priorities. So it's not so important as to who that person is or with what party they come from. What is important is how they navigate the government of national unity and how they align or present to Parliament ultimately a budget that is aligned to the minimum government priorities that is in the statement of intent. If the budget in no way underpins or supports this statement of intent and the minimum governing priorities, then it's a budget that should be rejected by the GNU and by Parliament.
Brett, on Friday, EFF leader Julius Malema said that they would like to bring up the impeachment for Phala. And of course, it's a bit too premature to talk whether this is going to happen or not. But I want to know, is the opposition or the former opposition, I can still call you the opposition because you haven't really put pen to paper with regards to joining the government of national unity. But let's just say the Good Party gets into this GNU. What happens then with Phala? Because I know that the Good Party has been quite vocal in holding the president to account with regards to this. So talk to us about that, please.
So, I mean, I've seen news reports that Helen Zille from the Democratic Alliance has said that they have an agreement with the ANC that they would not vote to impeach the president. And I don't know where that agreement was concluded. It may have been concluded in an oral discussion between them, because it's certainly not in any document that we've signed or agreed to. So, but I mean, Phala is a settled matter. Parliament has already dealt with it. At the time, you may recall, it was the Good Party that presented the only sensible way of handling Phala. Because when it was before Parliament, President Ramaphosa was taking the independent panel's findings on review. And so it would have made no sense to set up an impeachment committee if the president's review was ultimately successful. The alternative was to simply reject the independent panel's findings, which is what the ANC used their majority to do. So what the Good Party proposed was that the decision to set up the impeachment committee be taken, and that the impeachment committee suspend any hearing until such time as the president's review of that report was concluded. And if the president was successful, then there was no purpose in the committee proceeding. And if the president was unsuccessful, then the committee should have proceeded with the impeachment hearing. But our proposal was ultimately rejected by Parliament when Parliament voted to kill off the Phala report. So Phala has not been part of our discussions with the ANC, and we will deal with it if and when it arises, although I doubt it will arise.
Brett, as you know, wearing your cap as a member of Parliament, for the viewer that's watching, for the citizen of South Africa who still has a little bit of mixed feelings with regards to this amalgamation of parties forming national government. From a Good Party perspective, how do you assure the citizens that this is something that can work? Because I think every citizen wants stability within this country. So your reassurance as a Good Party member, as a member of Parliament, that something like this, should Good Party join, can be a viable option going ahead for the future.
So we saw the election results indicating or demonstrating that we were a country that was becoming increasingly polarized and divided, and that there were some parties who were actively dividing us based on race, and that this would undermine the social stability of our country and the future of our country, and for future generations we would leave a country that we wouldn't want to inherit ourselves, a deeply divided country, and a country that was divided racially and in some cases tribally. So I would say to South Africans that the government of national unity is not so much for us about which parties join, but really about the opportunity to pursue a united South Africa, where we have our differences ideologically and where we have our differences around the vision or how we achieve the vision of a united, prosperous country in which poverty is eliminated and employment is created. We have different views as to how that should happen, but we shouldn't use race or tribe or religion as a basis for dividing South Africans. And so we should view this as an opportunity to try and pursue a united country, even in our differences. And so I think that we must be encouraged by those parties who step forward to say, let's work together despite our ideological differences in pursuit of a country that eliminates poverty, that increases employment, and that eliminates inequality.
Brett, always a pleasure having you here on Hilaal TV. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, appreciate it.
That's Brett Herron, Good Party Secretary General. Of course, they'll be part of that national dialogue. We'll see what happens with regards to that. So that's all we have for you here on Talking Point. Don't forget, we will be coming to you live from the Union Buildings for President Cyril Ramaphosa's inauguration. For myself, Ross Patel, the rest of the team in Johannesburg, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.